Good morning. I'm Savannah Sellers. Joe's off this morning. Thank you very much for joining me on a busy news day. We're going to get started this hour with the growing fallout and reaction to former President Donald Trump, who is once again a target of another federal investigation. Two sources with direct knowledge of the matter confirm that Trump has received a so-called target letter from special counsel Jack Smith, notifying him that he is under investigation by a Washington-based grand jury examining the January 6th riot, as well as efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Well, the news initially broke when Trump posted a statement himself on social media yesterday, calling the special counsel leading the probe deranged Jack Smith. This is just the latest potential legal issue for the former president, who already faces charges in Manhattan related to alleged hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. You might remember that. And then federal charges in Florida over his handling of classified documents. Meanwhile, then in Georgia, a grand jury there is preparing to hear evidence in an investigation into possible election interference in that state, which could potentially lead to additional charges there. Well, for his part, Trump has denied all wrongdoing. There is, of course, a lot to dig into this morning. We have full coverage with reaction from the presidential campaign trail, the fallout in Washington, and the latest on the legal implications. Look at that team on your screen. We're going to get started with NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley in Washington. Ryan, good morning. Thanks very much for leading us off this morning. So let's just start with teasing out this particular investigation, because as I just laid out, there's a lot going on, and this is one of two investigations that special counsel Jack Smith is overseeing. And this one is the one that's related to alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election results. Remind us of this.
Sure. Yeah, arguably the most essential of all of these, because it has to do with that peaceful transfer of power and efforts to stop it. You know, this is shorthanded often as the January 6th investigation, but really it's broader than that. It's about a lot of Donald Trump's actions between the time that he lost the election and January 6th, including this fake elector scheme in which a number of people across the country in states that Donald Trump lost insisted that he won and purported themselves to be the electors that would then go through the process of going through the Electoral College and having the certified on January 6th. In fact, some of these slates of fake electors were delivered just before January 6th by one of Donald Trump's campaign aides who has already spoken with the grand jury. So, you know, producers have been camped out here at the federal courthouse in D.C., sort of trying to see who they could spot going up to the third floor for several months now. And we've seen, you know, the slow trickle of individuals come in, and it's sort of been building up to this moment. But getting the target letter is an indication that we're really at the end of the road here, giving Donald Trump a final chance to come in and sort of tell his story, maybe head off an indictment, something he's very unlikely to do, and that most criminal defense lawyers would suggest is a terrible idea for a defendant to do, but does indicate that he's almost certain to be indicted. So really getting to the crux of this here, and one of the most important investigations that has been done really in American history, and one of the most important ones that Donald Trump is facing at this moment.
So, Ryan, the former president says that his attorneys received this target letter on Sunday and that he's been given 4 days to come to Washington and tell grand jurors his side of the story. That would give him until tomorrow. Any indication on whether that trip is happening?
You know, for a few weeks now, June 20th or July 20th, rather, has been a date I've been a little bit focused on because, you know, we have this, we have someone we know who is coming in to testify before the grand jury tomorrow. It was sort of getting towards the end of the road. And I think that that was a date that, you know, this could be as soon as potentially tomorrow. So I think that that is an important date. It doesn't guarantee that that's when they're going to actually return this indictment, but I think it certainly suggests that within the next few weeks, because this grand jury typically meets on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that's when we've seen them at the federal courthouse and when they've heard testimonies. So, you know, if it's not Tuesday, there's always the potential, of course, that they come in on an extra day, you know, maybe a Friday or a Monday. But I think, you know, Thursday or Tuesday could be the potential days we should be looking at here in the future.
And also, Ryan, does this target letter ultimately mean the special counsel's close to wrapping up this investigation as a whole?
It does. Yeah. And I think that, you know, obviously there's other components of this. You could always have other indictments down the line, people who could be added on. But right now, I mean, obviously, that's the ultimate, I think, goal, or the ultimate, the biggest target sort of in this investigation was Trump. So, you know, it's hard to get a bigger name than Donald Trump on your indictment. But, you know, that could be, we could potentially see charges, of course, against others in the same indictment or going forward because this investigation and the special counsel has been given the authority to investigate any efforts to obstruct the peaceful transfer of power.
All right, Ryan Riley, thank you so much for leading us off. We're going to stay on this now and bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos here on set with us. Hi, Danny. Good morning. So we know that this is not the first time that Trump has taken, these legal matters to social media, immediately kind of preempting us finding out in any other way by saying this himself. Sources tell NBC News that the target letter was sent to Trump last weekend. What does it mean that the special counsel sent a target letter to former President Trump? And what should we expect moving forward? I know that the word target is very specific.
It is. Informally, there are three categories that someone can be in the eyes of the Department of Justice. You can be a target, a subject, or a witness. And DOJ officials and AUSAs are quick to tell you that this is not a hard and fast rule. And frankly, this is something that is very fluid. Someone, for example, that is merely a witness, the lowest level of criminal culpability, could come in and testify and reveal something very damaging and go from witness to target, which is the highest level of prospective criminal culpability in this very informal labeling system. But all the target letter does is inform the person that they are the target of an investigation. It asks them usually to preserve all their evidence, and thirdly, to give a call to the AUSA. Of course, if they want to come in theory, they can come in, sit down, and talk with the AUSA, with the government. That almost never happens. As an attorney, if my client has a target letter and they're a target of an investigation, they're almost certain to be a criminal defendant anyway. So there's 0.0 point in me walking him in there to sit down and possibly give the government more information that can be used against him.
And then also, just very quickly, the language in the Truth Social post from the former president was that almost always means that arrest and indictment. It seems like we're all in agreement that that is the case.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's very rare that somebody is a target and then they get downgraded to a subject or a witness. And especially in this case, look, this is not the ordinary case. All of these cases against Trump. Keep in mind that every prosecutor, federal or state, that is working on this case or heading up an investigation wants to make sure their case is airtight before they go after the most elusive criminal defendant in American history. Someone, I mean, there may never have been another criminal defendant like this who, just by voting indications alone, might have arguably half the jury from the moment he gets in there, if, for example, half the jury voted Republican. So this is going to be a very difficult case for any prosecutor, irrespective of the charges. So you must assume that if they've deemed him a target at this point, they are very unlikely to downgrade that, to learn something revelatory from Donald Trump if he came in to talk to them and he explained his side of the story. It's very unlikely that the government would say, oh, you know, the way you put it, maybe you aren't so guilty in our minds anymore.
Right.
So don't listen to what these former federal prosecutors, who are my friends and I love them dearly, don't listen to what they tell you, that there's a possibility that they could reconsider this if Trump came in and talked to them. They're not reconsidering anything. If Trump's a target, it is highly, 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 highly likely that he is going to be charged.
So then that would be a third indictment and second federal. How do you manage these simultaneous investigations, potential trials, and then also, of course, there's a campaign going on, by the way. But what does that look like, those all at the same time? I
mean, this is something only someone with the resources of a Donald Trump could really even begin to handle. Yeah, sure, if an indigent criminal defendant had all these cases pending, they would have court-appointed counsel. But, I mean, Donald Trump has so many complex cases in different jurisdictions that he has to deal with. I mean, you generally need someone local in that area, so he's got to have a team that has boots on the ground, but also they have to be, at least on some level, communicating with each other for planning purposes alone, for scheduling purposes. I mean, there are so many issues going on here, it's hard to even keep them all straight, just in terms of scheduling court appearances, because it's not just trial, it's all these hearings that are pending. And to the extent some of these cases overlap, everyone needs to make sure they have not just a cohesive defense team, but that they stay on message and that they're consistent throughout their defense.
All right, Danny Ceballos, as always, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. And now let's bring in NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin and talk reaction from Capitol Hill. Hi, Julie. Good to see you. Welcome back. Newly married woman. We appreciate you joining us this morning. It's really good to see you. So many Republicans were quick to defend Trump following this announcement that he received this letter. Tell us the messaging we're hearing from some of his more loyal allies in Congress.
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. It's so good to be with you. Look, you laid out some of those other issues swirling around, some of the other investigations. And if you paid attention to how lawmakers in Congress, particularly the former president's top allies have responded there, then this should be of no surprise, right? In the first and second indictment, they went to his defense in the most part, of course, in the House, in specific here, Speaker McCarthy coming to his defense then and coming to his defense now with this target letter, trying to say that this was political, that this was a retaliation by Democrats, by President Biden, by his Justice Department, because the former president is doing so well in the polls. Take a listen to more of what McCarthy had to say yesterday.
Well, I guess under a Biden administration, Biden America, you'd expect this. If you noticed recently, President Trump went up in the polls and was actually surpassing President Biden for re-election. So what do they do now? Weaponize government to go after their number one opponent.
Look, you're not hearing that same reaction over on the Senate side, but what McCarthy is saying here is no surprise because the former president is actually making calls to some of his top allies in the House. In many cases, you'd argue that's why he previewed this target letter. It's why he previewed his other indictments as well, to get that support and really rally his allies to his corner, and in many ways also test them.
Also, Julie, specifically, Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz says he plans to unveil legislation that would defund this investigation, the investigation of special counsel Jack Smith that we're talking about, claiming that it is attacking democracy. Is there any indication that Republicans are planning a larger offensive in response to this possible indictment? And is it likely that a bill like that could go anywhere in Congress?
Dan, I'll work backwards there. Is it likely it'll go anywhere in Congress? No, because Democrats still control the Senate. And of course, both chambers need to move something like this for it to become law. However, Republicans are really mastering their leverage here and what they can have leverage in, which is the power of the purse. We've heard this even before Gaetz suggested this. We heard this from top Republicans on committees like Jim Jordan, who suggested that they should maybe defund the FBI and the DOJ as a whole for what they're saying is weaponization of government against conservatives. It's not likely that this will go anywhere, like I said, but it is just further messaging from Republicans. They're trying to really squeeze these government agencies, trying to break the trust with the American people in suggesting that this is solely political, that the former president does not deserve it. And it's really interesting, and it will continue to be so, to see how they tie this to the upcoming government spending fight. We have a shutdown deadline that is again looming at the end of September. So all of these pieces kind of fit into the same puzzle here. Whether this is going to go forward on its own and anything is going to happen, probably not, but they need bipartisan cooperation to do just about anything in Congress, and certainly funding and spending is at the top of that list.
All right, Julie Sirkin with an important piece of this puzzle this morning. Thank you so much, and congratulations again. Welcome back. Let's now take a look at how this latest development could impact the 2024 election with NBC's senior national politics reporter, John Allen. John, great to have you with us this morning. So look, I mean, as Julie just pointed out, these legal issues for the former president have not dented his position as the Republican frontrunner in the polls, and by quite a bit. I guess first, is there any indication that another potential indictment could take its toll on his chances? But also, what does that tell you just about the American voter and how they're feeling about this, similarly to what Julie just laid out about Republicans in Congress?
It's a great set of questions, Savannah. Let me start with this. Not only is it not dented Donald Trump's support, the past indictments and so far this one, it has improved his support among Republican primary voters. At one point before he was indicted in Manhattan, Donald Trump was in a place where he was being contested heavily by Ron DeSantis, whose poll numbers in some places were approaching Trump's. And now what Trump looks at across the board, whether you're talking about national polls or state-by-state polls, is 20 and 30-point leads over DeSantis and much greater leads over the rest of the Republican field. So this is the fact that he has been indicted has not hurt him at all. He's been able to use it to political effect with Republican voters. Many of them believe that, as these members of Congress that Julie was talking about have been saying, that the government has been weaponized against Trump unfairly. And then, you know, in terms of what it says about the electorate, that the indictments don't matter, it says that there's a great percentage of Americans who are so tightly tied to their party leaders, who are so tightly tied to politicians that even the prospect of criminal prosecution doesn't move them away from them.
Yeah, I think it's such an important thing to keep front and center as we continue this conversation, though. It's about how so many people still feel about the former president. There's been a range of different reactions from Trump's GOP primary rivals. What are we hearing from them? You know, there's been kind of this split in terms of when they're going after him, when they're not, some who will not touch it at all. What are we hearing now?
It's interesting, Savannah. I think most of them are kind of in a box of their own making because January 6th, of course, happened more than 2 years ago, and most of them have taken a position on that in the past that makes it difficult for them to get off of it. So we heard yesterday Asa Hutchinson, the former governor of Arkansas, former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, both criticizing Trump. Both of them have said that January 6th effectively should disqualify him. And at the same time, we heard from some of the other candidates who are edging a little more toward criticism that what's going on in terms of a prosecution is unjust. Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, sort of epitomizes that with what he said. Let's take a listen to that.
I think it was shown how he was in the White House and didn't do anything while things were going on. He should have come out more forcefully, of course that. But to try to criminalize that, that's a different issue entirely. And I think that we want to be in a situation where, you don't have one side just constantly trying to put the other side in jail. And that, unfortunately, is what we're seeing now.
And so what you hear there, Savannah, is DeSantis on the one hand saying, well, maybe Trump could have done a little more, should have acted more forcefully, but on the other hand saying, again, Ron DeSantis, former prosecutor himself, saying that the case against him is political and basically bunk.
John, also speaking of DeSantis, over the last week, you've had a ton of great exclusive reporting about various campaign struggles, from financing to staffing to firing. Tell us about what you're hearing there.
Thank you, Savannah. The most recent thing is that allies of Ron DeSantis, who have been clamoring for all kinds of changes on his campaign to get him to reverse direction, are pushing him to fire or demote Janera Peck, his campaign manager. For now, it appears that she's safe in her job, but how long that lasts is anybody's guess.
All right, John Allen, we appreciate you. Fabulous reporting as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move off this story and turn to the ongoing heat wave rolling across the country. The record high temperatures are now giving way to new issues for millions of Americans. This was the scene in Phoenix yesterday. Look at these images. This is a dust storm blanketing the city with wind speeds up to 30 miles an hour. The storm brought dangerous conditions to an already fragile city because Phoenix broke yet another record on Tuesday. This one set back in 1974. This is the first time the city has measured 19 days in a row where it was 110 degrees or hotter. 19 days, it's getting close to a month, 110 degrees. Just try to think about that. Meanwhile, air quality continues to be an issue for the Northeast. Massachusetts is warning residents to prepare for another day of haze brought on by Canadian wildfires. NBC News correspondent Blaine Alexander has more on the extreme weather.
Well, guys, good morning to you. We officially have 4 weeks of summer under our belt today, but with this relentless heat wave making it clear that it's not showing any signs of cooling down, a lot of people are really just kind of running out of ways to say that it's too hot. You know, typically on a summer day, you'd say cool off at a pool like this or any other place where you can find some sort of water. But really, when you're talking about temperatures, record-breaking temperatures that are plaguing more than 60 million Americans, being outside for too long just is not safe. So that's why experts are saying take this seriously. Make sure that you take cool showers. Don't use a fan as your source of cooling because that can give you a false sense of security without actually cooling down your body. Now, in addition to the heat, the other thing we're watching is air quality. It had been a really brutal 1-2 punch for some areas that were dealing with triple-digit heat and also dealing with diminished air quality because of those Canadian wildfires. The good news is, with a few exceptions today, the air quality is expected to pick back up and actually improve. But again, so many people dealing with heat. Back to you.
Absolutely. Blaine Alexander, thank you so much. Now let's take a closer look at how those deadly temperatures are hitting the South. Michelle Grossman is with us in studio this morning with the latest. Hey, Michelle, good morning.
Hey there. Great to see you. And we're looking at these temperatures continuing. No break in sight, at least for the near future. We're talking through the weekend and into next week. We have that area of high pressure just tacked in place. It's not moving. So 77 million Americans under some sort of heat alert today. A lot of excessive heat warnings. That's where you see that hot pink color. So Las Vegas, Phoenix, over to Dallas, Little Rock, Monroe, looking at some real really dangerous temperatures. Corpus Christi, too, you're going to feel like 113 as you go throughout the day. So the Southwest continues to sizzle. We're looking at temperatures so hard to wrap your head around. Phoenix today, 117. That will probably break the record of 116. 116 in Palm Springs, 107 in Lubbock, 107 in San Angelo, 108 in Laredo. And into the southeast, we're looking really warm as well. So that was today. Tomorrow, we're looking at those temperatures pretty much the same. We're looking at a repeat performance again and again and again. Tucson tomorrow, 113, breaking a record of 109. At least that's what we expect. Albuquerque, 101, 112 in Las Vegas, and 105 in Austin. And this is where it gets even tougher, right? It's not going to end. We're looking at Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with those temperatures into the 110. So 119 on Friday, Saturday, 118. This is Palm Springs. And that's going to continue. The southeast continues to sizzle. It's not just the heat, but it's the humidity, too. We're factoring that high humidity. It's going to make it feel even worse than it actually is. So we're looking at temperatures into the hundreds, into the 90s. You factor in that humidity, feeling like 116 in Corpus Christi. It'll feel like 104 in Tampa, feeling like 106 in Miami, and it will feel like 105 in Charleston. This, too, lasts throughout the weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, into the upper 90s in Jacksonville, right near the 100-degree mark on Friday, and then into the mid-90s in Tampa. That doesn't sound that bad when you factor in the humidity. It'll feel like over 100 degrees. That continues to be the big story. No relief from the heat, but we're also tracking the chance for severe storms. That's through the upper Midwest into the Central Plains. Could see some really gusty winds, some large hail with that. And there is a flood risk today in the Tennessee Valley. We're already seeing flooding happening right now, some water rescues. That flooding concern will return to the Northeast tomorrow. Here's the setup. We have a pair of cold fronts that are moving through. The first one's going to bring the chance for flooding to the Tennessee Valley, as I just talked about. And then we're looking at those line of storms developing with that daytime heating in the upper Midwest and also the Central Plains.
Oh, I've said it before. I'll say it again. Climate anxiety. There is just so much going on. When you see something like that happen in Phoenix, that dust cloud we showed.
That's a really good way to put it, right? It does invoke that anxiety.
Absolutely. We really need to keep talking about it. Michelle, thank you so much. Great to have you here with us.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.